Where in the vast universe are you tuning in from before we start? Leave your nation or city in the comments section. I adore the depth to which these Wild West stories may go. Now get comfortable. At the edge of the frostbitten fence line, the boy lay coiled like windblown ash, wrapped in nothing but the final thread of life and a strip of ripped deer hide. The snow stuck to his eyelids as though even winter was at a loss for what to do with him, and his ribs squeezed hard on his tiny chest. The leather creaked in the silence as Boaz Callahan drew back on his rear. The plains was sliced by the wind, which carried silence with it. At first he merely gazed without moving. That youngster had the appearance of something that God had forgotten. Boaz hadn't seen a child since the illness claimed his life, hadn't eaten warm food in 5 days, and hadn't spoken to another person in almost 3 weeks. However, the youngster was still lying there, his blue lips barely producing a brittle puff of breath. What sort of man would ride by a child who is dying? Boaz moved in his seat. Sage, his elderly mare, seemed to be asking him the same question as she pawed the snow. It was a quarter of a mile to the cabin. Cold fire, the scent of salt pork, and horses was still on his hands. His boots crunched through the ice surface as he slowly dismounted. The youngster didn't move as he knelt down. The child sobbed so softly that Boaz thought it might have been the wind when he reached to lift him. The frost was burning against his flesh. Fever, and his eyes opened half open, wild and dull, and he stared at Boaz's face as if he didn't dislike or trust him, but just wasn't sure if he was real. Boaz carried the youngster like a splintered branch after wrapping him in his garment. They rekindled the fire inside the cottage. Boaz waited for the infant to wake up, breathe more easily, scream, or pass away while holding him in his arms, and setting a mug of weak broth on the table. The youngster, however, simply slept fitfully and burned up. Boaz did not open the ancient Bible, but he did touch it on the shelf. He didn't say a prayer aloud. The infant was barely alive in the morning. The dawn flickered with curiosity. From where had he come? Why was he by himself? Boaz used a carved spoon that belonged to his wife to feed him droplets of broth. She had previously used it for their son. He made an effort to avoid staring at it too long. Like a fawn, the boy drank a little, then more. The boy gripped the frayed edge of a quilt made by long-buried hands when Boaz put him down again. That made him feel as though the youngster knew how to handle sadness in a gentle way. The snow had grown thicker by midday. The following day, as Boaz was purchasing flour and salt pork in the local store, people conversed softly. Sheriff Riker looked at him intently from beneath his black helmet. "He is yours." "He ain't nobody's," Boaz declared. "It appears to be Apache?" Boaz gave a shrug. "It appears to be hungry." That response didn't sit well. It reverberated. In a place where distrust was more important than compassion, it was too chilly and tidy. "Bless her bones," Widow Tally handed Boaz 2 additional jars of lard without explaining why. The boy was awake, silent, and staring when he got home. Despite his refusal to talk, he was constantly 1 step behind Boaz and followed him with those large, broken eyes. He pressed his palm against Boaz's boot and cuddled up beside the fire at night, perhaps to ensure he didn't vanish, as though he understood what it was like to be abandoned. On the 3rd night, Boaz discovered him sleeping tightly, gripping a piece of cornbread while curled up in the kitchen corner. For the first time in years, Boaz started crying at that point, not because he was depressed, but rather because he was leaning back against the door. That's right. Simply because nobody asked if you were ready, and the world continued to revolve. On the 4th evening, Boaz heard someone knock. He had no one in mind. His chest was stretched taut as he leaned his shotgun against the door. He opened it to reveal 2 individuals standing on the porch, framed by the sunset light and falling snow. A towering, proud Apache woman with claw marks from the soil itself running down her cheek. The chill made the other, softer, smaller hands tremble. Both were silent and dressed in buffalo hide. The taller one struck fire into his eyes, the smaller one with a softer object, perhaps hope. The youngster then dashed past him and into their embrace. Instead of crying, He put his forehead against the taller woman's waist and encircled her with his arms as if he had been suppressing his emotions for too long. With his hat in hand and his throat dry, Boaz stood in the doorway. The disfigured woman gave him a serious look. You gave him food. Yes, I did. Why? Boaz took a swallow. He was in need of bread. There was weight to the ensuing hush. Humming a melody too old for words, the other woman knelt and held the boy in her arms. Her hair was covered in snow. Boaz could now see how young they were, just a little older than girls, but they were aging due to anguish. Please, let us stay one night, just till snow passes, the scarred woman murmured after taking a deep breath. Boaz gave one nod. No more is required. He handed the hearth to them. The barn was taken by him. He remembered his wife that night while he laid on straw, using his coat as a blanket, but this time he thought about her hands rather than her face. They had handled the bread as though it were holy. It had been years since he had dreamed. However, he suddenly had gentle dreams about firelight and tunes he had never heard before. The youngster used a stick to create circles in the snow while playing outside the following day. The women prepared meals. While the other sliced turnips, one hummed. Boaz stood on the porch and watched. Aoka was the name of the scarred one. It was Salali who was quiet. Aoka didn't say anything, but her eyes didn't miss anything. Upon noticing Boaz observing, she declared, "We are not thieves." "I am aware. The town won't give a damn." "I am also aware of that." When she scowled, her scar became tighter. "My sister has sewing skills. After that, my garments need to be repaired." It only required that. Another night went by. Then another. They remained. Something between them started to settle, like snow on the roof, unseen, until it muffled the sound of everything, not because it was asked. Boaz constructed bunks, brought down blankets, and converted the dungeon into a room. Wherever he landed, the boy Koda, as they called him, slept sometimes next to Salali, sometimes beneath the table, and once curled up like a puppy next to Boaz's chair. The sheriff showed up one morning. He didn't knock. Before the man got off his horse, Boaz went outside. "Do you have any company?" "Flat?" Riker said. "Just people, Apache people." Boaz remained silent. They intend to remain. They intend to eat." "I didn't ask for that." Boaz gave him a look so intense that it could shatter a stone. Riker moved about in his saddle. "Town is anxious. People claim that you are concealing problems." "I'm providing food for others, that's all." People's recollections were short, Boaz, very briefly. Boaz took a step forward. "Then perhaps they should put him in writing." "In the snow," Riker spat. "Make yourself comfortable." He rode slowly away. Behind him, the wind shifted as if the air itself didn't want to follow. Aoka packed her knapsack that evening. Remained silent. As she folded the boy's little blanket, Salali sobbed softly. They were not stopped by Boaz. He went outside and sat on the porch, his mouth full of dust and the sky full of clouds. The youngster then emerged, stood between them, and raised his arms to Saludi and Boaz, just gazed. No words. Something split open at that same instant. A yoke sighed. "Trouble is not what we desire." Boaz gave a headshake. "Then we're identical." They remained. That flimsy word got out. Boaz had softened, according to some. Witchcraft was muttered by others. Widow Boaz had more heart than all of AM together, Tally told anyone who would listen. Then the fire started. At the ranch, no. A barn was illuminated in town. The horses were alarmed. The sky was seared by flames. The message was clear, but no one was harmed? It would be them the next time. That evening, Boaz stood with his shotgun laying on his lap rather than raised. Salali sat next to him after bringing out tea. "Keep quiet." "I can go," she muttered. "We can leave." Boaz gave her a look. "Do you feel secure in the outdoors?" "No, you won't go then." "As easy as breathing." As he cut firewood the following morning, Aoka stood by his side, said, "You're not like others." Boaz remained silent. She said, "You lost someone." He gave a nod. "We also did." They didn't actually talk until then. The words didn't make a connection. There was a mutual quiet. Days went by. When Sage sneezed, Koda laughed, grinned more, and drew horses in the dirt. Boaz discovered a lovely repaired quilt on his bed one evening. When he turned his head away, Sally flushed, but he remained silent. Sensations of warmth, me-time, and seeds. On a Tuesday, the storm arrived. Men carrying torches rode in. 6 of them, with scarves covering half of their faces. From the ridge, Boaz observed them. You don't have to inquire why they arrived. In the doorway, he stood. Didn't grab his firearm. Aoka emerged behind him and stood at his left. Solali also arrived. The boy's hand gripped her dress. A torch was raised by the leader. We alerted you. Boaz took a step forward. You did. You're on their side. I support fire, bread, and lads who shouldn't perish in the snow. The torch wavered. Men whispered. Solali moved forward and played a single tremulous note while holding a flute from her belt. Then another, a lullaby that halted the wind itself yet was too old to recall. A man put his torch due.